Good morning, everyone. And thank you very much, Margrethe, for this warm welcome. I will be, I will just be echoing your messages because they were spot on. This is exactly what we need to hear in these days. It's a pity for me that I could not join you in Lisbon personally, but I'm really happy to be able to participate in this important event organized by the Portuguese presidency and of course hosted by you, the Portuguese Competition Authority. I know I'm a few days late, but I would want to wish everyone in Lisbon a happy Santo Antonio. I've been told that sort of in more normal times, this is when the city celebrates San Antonio's Days. It's a festival start to the summer, grilled sardines, parades, and it's also a traditional time to get married. In other words, it's about optimism. It's about looking forward, something I think we all need in these days. And there are many reasons for us to be optimistic. Vaccination campaigns are proceeding at good pace. More than half of Europe's adult population has now received at least one dose of vaccine, and more than 100 million Europeans are fully vaccinated. Our spring forecasts show that Europe's recovery is already underway, and the trick, of course, is to maintain good momentum. The shift to a greener, more digital economy will require a sustained policy drive. It will not happen by itself. And the same is true for supporting the economy. Now, you might be thinking, yeah, well, all good, but what has that to do with competition policy? Well, actually, quite a lot. Open and fair supported euro growth over the last 7 decades straight. And these are, I think, the solid foundation on which our recovery should also be built. With competition law enforcement, we make sure that consumers, businesses, they have alternatives for the products and the services that they need, and that companies have the incentive to compete. We do so by keeping in check both the accumulation of economic power and the misuse of economic power that could harm fair competition. Our objective to preserve a competitive environment in Europe is as relevant now as ever, and it is essential for a strong recovery. Still, we remain attentive to economic and technological developments. And this is why we have started major policy review. Some policy projects are about sharpening the tools in our toolbox. Other policy projects are about complementing the toolbox with new tools. When it comes to the tools, we announced in September last year our intention to fully use the existing possibility under Article 22 of the merger regulation, of course. And in March, we published detailed guidance as to how we put this into practice. The aim is, of course, to bridge the enforcement gap, which started to appear on the recent years as our economies are transforming. Now, what we will do is to encourage and accept more referrals under Article 22 in cases where the transaction does not meet the national merger control thresholds. This is meant to give member states and the Commission the flexibility to control concentrations who merit a review at EU level without imposing burden on transactions that do not. There's already been a case of us accepting jurisdiction over a transaction which was not notifiable in member states, who asked for the referral. Illumia's proposed acquisition of Grail, a company developing breakthrough cancer detection tests. And I think this specific also pays tribute to the very, very good cooperation between the European Commission in our competition law enforcement and the competition authorities in every member state. And obviously, I want to warmly thank you for this, because we only serve well when we serve together. In antitrust, we are adapting our rules to better face the challenges posed by digitization and the need to green the economy. Our review of antitrust rules for vertical agreements is now approaching its final stage. We closed our public consultation in March and expect to report on findings shortly. We have also just finalized our evaluation of the horizontal block exemption regulation and their guidelines. The feedback that we got is that they are useful, but need to be updated, in particular in the light of digitization and the pursuit of sustainability goals. The process for new rules is already underway. As the COVID crisis showed, cooperation between firms in research and development or to increase production can bring significant benefits. So we will be looking at ways as to how to encourage pro-competitive cooperation. And that's, of course, including the participation of small and medium-sized firms. And we will include guidance on data sharing and data pooling arrangements, as well as sustainability agreements. Platform work is another area where clarification is needed. Our EU competition rules, they should not be seen as standing in the way of collective negotiations or agreements to improve working conditions of platform workers or other solo workers for that matter. And that is why we plan to issue new guidance to make sure that it is clear what circumstances under which solo self-employed can engage in collective negotiations without risking a competition law infringement. When it comes to filling the gaps, we adopted the Digital Markets Act and the Foreign Subsidies proposal, both with the co-legislators working at full speed, and we hope for an adoption in 2022. And here again, I would like to thank the Portuguese presidency for the progress achieved, and all the national competition authorities for the engagement in the discussion about the Digital Markets Act. We need to design the right European architecture for tackling digital platforms. One central feature of the future architecture should be a coherent application of competition law and regulation to digital platforms. To make the most of the complementarity between competition enforcement and regulation, we'll need effective cooperation and coordination mechanisms. It is fascinating to design new policies, and it's understandable that new initiatives like these, they grab the headlines. But without vigorous enforcement and the knowledge built in cases, well, new laws risk being nothing more than just a wish list. And this is why I'm so proud of the enforcement work my services have been delivering. It has been difficult times. Lockdown, some locked away from our families, some locked in with the families, working, dining, entertaining, teaching kids, all under the same roof for months with no end. without being able to physically meet or to travel. It has been difficult, and I think we all know what it has been like. But the even more amazing thing is that despite the difficulties, work has continued throughout this crisis period in anti-commerce and in state aid. And in all sectors, the usual harmful behavior are still with us. That be predation, excessive pricing, cartels, antitrust, artificial barriers across the single market. In antitrust and cartels, we took 8 decisions last year, leveling 370 million euros in fines and imposing important remedies. The cases covered sectors from pharmaceuticals to ethylene and automotive parts. The cases, I think especially in light of the crisis, we know the importance of keeping pharmaceutical markets competitive. And this year we already adopted 5 decisions, from a cartel in bonds trading to excessive pricing of cancer drugs, from video games to rail cargo. As you can hear, in all sectors remain our priority. We opened 5 new investigations this year, whether that is the Mondelez investigations in new coffee and in the coffee and biscuit markets, or the conduct of dominant firms in wholesale electricity markets and the pharmaceutical industry. And of course, we continue our work in digital markets. We issued statement of objections to both Apple and Amazon. We just opened fresh proceedings against Facebook. A central concern is looking at competitive behavior in platforms with dual roles. This means looking at the way data is being used by platforms that also compete with business customers from which they collect data. Or it means looking at the way closed ecosystems like iOS and distortion of competition in aftermarket. Just last week, we published a report with our initial findings from our sector inquiry on the consumer Internet of Things, which seems to back up our concerns that certain behaviors are recurrent and systematic in digital markets. Merger 2, there has been no shift in enforcement dynamism, and no reduction in the number of notifications compared with the last 5 years. The intervention rate during COVID in 2020 and so far in 2021 was just above 5%, almost identical to 2019. Since the start of this Commission's mandate, we adopted 18 Phase 1 conditional approvals, 7 Phase 2 approvals, and 3 Phase 2 investigations are still ongoing. We've also seen 3 withdrawals of notifications, 2 of which after we had sent the statement of objection. Of course, I could mention every one of those by name because they have interesting features, every one of them. But let me highlight 2. First, the acquisition of Eaton Hydraulics by Danfoss, and just as well as the cooperation between the Commission and national competition authorities is of the essence. Well, global cooperation is of the essence too. And this merger is an excellent example of the good cooperation with our American counterparts. The resulting commitments averted a possible global dominant market position in hydraulic components. Second, the acquisition of Refinitiv by the London Stock Exchange, which led to the divestment of Borsa Italiana to Euronext. The remedy prevent creation of a quasi monopoly for the trading of European government bonds. Having a choice of trading platforms is very important for the price and quality competition, and also to foster innovation and ensure financial stability in Europe. Sometimes, of course, the story is also about what not happens. And that, I think, especially in merger policy. We see this in a number of recent phase 2 withdrawals. There were certainly reasons to abandon the transaction in sectors affected by the pandemic. But I can also assure you that we were still investigating the cases thoroughly when the parties decided to break off. When applying merger control during severe shocks, we need to make sure that as companies emerge from the crisis, the competitive foundations that they are still there for the industry to take off. And that is why we were so vigilant in the case of Air Canada's proposed acquisition of Transat. We looked at the impact of the COVID crisis, but our preliminary conclusion was that both companies would remain actual or potential competitors on most routes between Europe and Canada. And now when traveling is at long last within our grasp again, we all appreciate to still have choice, quality and competitive prices when traveling. In Lisbon, well, the link between St. Anthony's Day and marriage go back many, many years. Thousands of young people in Lisbon have been tying the knots on the 13th of June. And even if this year the celebrations are not the same, well, I'm sure that you will join me in wishing them every success. As those of us who have been married for a long time would know, there's a lot of ingredients that must come together to make that success a reality. Of course, you need to adapt. You need to bring in, so to speak, new policy projects and change with times. But the real trick is how you manage the day-to-day, staying true to your core principles and values and implementing that in a consistent manner. And I think that is indeed also true for our work in competition policy. Thank you very much.